Hello, welcome back to the Willy Bragg Show, everyone. We have with us today Blue Moon. It's been a while. How are you today?
Hi, Willy. I've been good. I've seen that you've been keeping it up and streaming. I've kind of quit all of that just because I've lost patience, but I still like to come on other people's stuff and boost and share on Twitter and stuff.
Oh, well, I'm always glad to have you back. It's always a pleasure having you on the show. And we have here on the chat line Miguel, hey, and Snipe Hunter, hello, and Daniel Berry Sports Highlights, yo. We have a couple of people here with us. Actually, we have a couple of more people. I guess they're a little shy and not saying hello just yet, but maybe they will. I guess we'll be talking about Tulsi Gabbard today, aren't we?
Yeah. The Tulsi Gabbard phenomenon. I know you and me, Willie. We've talked about this in the past. Neither of us really liked her that much for a while now. But it is interesting because I feel like her type of political celebrity had a lot of pull on a lot of people, and some people it still has a lot of pull on them, and I feel like it needs to be detangled or something, because there are so many people that they go to town on AOC and how horrible somebody like AOC, but Tulsi Gabbard, because she's less liberal, under quotation marks, or seems more moderate, whatever it is that the thought process that they have going on, they're kind of unable to detangle themselves from this kind of political celebrity. And it's very interesting how this happens, and how all of us that warned people about this, we were called too liberal, or we have we're getting triggered or something by Tulsi Gabbard for calling out this woman that's an obvious fraud.
I used to kind of write her off as sort of when I used to be pro AOC and pro Tulsi Gabbard in the past. Once upon a time, I used to call her the grown up AOC. But I have no use for them politically anymore. I mean, they both AOC's gone into a flaky woke direction, and Tulsi Gabbard's gone into a neocon direction. She went from an Abby Martin wannabe to now trying to imitate Nikki Haley. I was like, what the hell?
Right, absolutely. And when I first saw her, I think I saw a few videos and I liked some of the positions that she took too. Very similar to you, I fell off of her political celebrity right around the time the AOC started to suck. I also realized that she sucked, but I noticed that a lot of people, they dropped the squad thing and they never actually dropped Tulsi Gabbard. They never understood. They never fully understood what she's actually about. So maybe this episode can help talk some sense into these people, because nothing I've been able to say has really untangled some of, nothing I ever said. It really is just when she started to actually openly support this genocide in Israel, that's when a lot of people woke up. But this was obvious far before that. And, maybe we can talk about some of the things she said in the past, which, made this very obvious. A lot of people didn't see it.
She's got a complicated past, and I mean, her personal biography of her growing up, where she was a decade ago when she was a normie Democrat being groomed by Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama to be their successor. Then she got on the Bernie bandwagon, and then all of a sudden the right wing started to comfort her when Hillary Clinton accused her of being a Russian asset. It's just amazing what directions. I mean, she is a grifter. I've decided she's a first-class opportunist.
I mean, basically that's it. But the interesting thing about her is that she fuses two different types of national fascism, which is like the neocon conservatism that you see in the U.S. with like support of all of these wars in the Middle East, specifically Middle East and the Horn of Africa, which is basically the Muslim part of Africa. And then Hindu nationalism. She blends Hindu nationalism into this. So the interesting thing is that she's not even really, I guess you would say, she's not, genetically Hindu. She's not from India. She doesn't have any ties to India. She's a convert, right? Or she and her family were converts to Hinduism. Not even to Hinduism, really, to a branch of Hinduism that is called the Science of Identity Foundation or something, which is basically an American interpretation of Hinduism. I don't know that much about Hinduism, to be honest, but one of the people that pointed out how fascist Tulsi Gabbard actually is, how fascist and authoritarian she is, was somebody that I knew that was Indian, and she told me, she was like, Tulsi Gabbard basically backs and represents Modi, who basically represents the most toxic strain of Hindu nationalism and fascism in India. Now, like India, for anyone that isn't familiar with India, because there's a lot of East Asians in Hawaii, and including Indians, and some of them back her campaign. They backed her campaign when she rose, right? And apparently a lot of them were tied to this Science of Identity Foundation, and a lot of the political team around her were tied to this Science of Identity Foundation. Now, when she goes around, she talks about like peace and love and how everyone should be tolerant. If you notice, there's tolerance towards everyone on her platform, except for Muslims. Except for Muslims. This has been very consistently throughout her career. There's tolerance. She's shown tolerance through everyone except for Muslims. And one of the dog whistles that she uses very frequently is things like Islamism. She'll say things like, there's an Islamist threat. Well, what is Islamism? Islamism doesn't actually really mean anything, which is why I call everything that she says about Muslims and Islam on Fox News is basically what I call Tulsi Gabbard gibberish. It's Tulsi Gabbard gibberish. It doesn't mean a fucking thing. So Islamism, it can mean many different things. And if you Google what it is, it has represented, throughout history, anything basically from liberal to progressive to conservative and terrorist groups. It basically doesn't mean anything. It's like, if you had a word called Christianism or Christianity, what is Christianity? There's progressive strains in Christianity, there's conservative strains, there's the evangelical Christians, there's liberation theology. Christianity comes in many different forms, and so does Islam. So basically, if you Google Islamism, and you just look at Wikipedia, just Wikipedia, I'm not even asking you to go to the library and get a dictionary, it says that it is a religious political ideology, and then it originally was simply used, Islamism, to mean the religion of Islam, not an ideology or movement. So that's the actual origin of the word, right? It first appeared in the English language in 1696. The term appears in the U.S. Supreme Court decision in Re Ross, 1891. And then, by 1938, Islamism seems to have virtually disappeared from English usage. The term remained absent from vocabulary until the Iranian Islamic Revolution of 1978, which brought Ayatollah Khomeini's concept of Islamic government to Iran. The new usage appeared without taking into consideration how the term Islamist was already being used in traditional Arabic scholarship in a theological sense, as in relating to the religion of Islam, not a political ideology. An Islamist refers to any person who attributes himself to Islam without affirming or negating that attribution. So, in contrast, referring to a person as a Muslim or kafir implies an explicit affirmation or negation of that person's attribution to Islam. In order to evade the problem resulting from the confusion between the Western and Arabic usage of the term Islamist, Arab journalists invented the term Islamawi instead of Islami, which is Islamist, in reference to the politicians, which is nonetheless sometimes criticized as being ungrammatical. So you have basically like Westerners, like Tulsi Gabbard, taking a word like Islamism, which really just refers to the religion, and turning it into something political. Like in Arabic, they invented a new word to distinguish the political movements associated with Islam from the religious movements, because they want to separate what the West is doing. What the West is doing is they're taking Arabic words like Islamist, and they're turning it into equating it with a terrorist political ideology. And not only that, the way the word began was specifically Islamist politically in 1978, 1979 with the Iranian Revolution, right? So when Tulsi Gabbard is pushing back on Islamism, she is specifically referring to Iran. That is basically what she is referring to. She's not talking about terrorist extremism on behalf of ISIS, which the United States funds. If you're using that word, you're specifically referring to Iran, which is called, like they call it the Islamic Republic of Iran, which, a lot of people have different opinions about Iran. They do have they do have a lot of conservative elements in their society, but Fiorello, for example, she went to Iran. It's not as conservative as people think over there, women can still get an education. They have a very good higher education system. They have female doctors, female engineers. It's not Afghanistan by any means. In fact, Iran has really defended itself from the West and has avoided becoming a country like Afghanistan. So when Tulsi Gabbard talks about Islamism, she is basically referring to one of the countries that has best preserved itself from these extremist terrorist organizations backed by the U.S. and the West that use extremist ideology using Islam, and she's specifically using something that came out of Iran. That's what people have to understand. This stuff is really complicated because it's just because we're, we don't live over there and we're not Muslims, right? So we have to decipher all of this for ourselves, because it's complicated when you're not from the Arab world to figure out what these people are talking about. I used to not know what this meant either. So you have to Google it, look it up, and figure out how these politicians are tricking you. And it's very complicated, You have to do your own research.
Yeah, there are things about Iran that I found that I was really surprised in a positive way that differs from the rest of the other countries in the Middle East. For example, there, when it comes to anti-Semitism, there is the least amount of anti-Semitism in Iran, and they're actually fairly tolerant toward the Jewish population in that country compared to many of its neighbors in that region.
Well, you know, the thing about a lot of the neighbors in that region that people don't really understand, and Richard Medhurst like talks about it pretty well in a lot of his shows, is that Israel, they planted false flags all over the Middle East in order to force migration of Jews to Israel, like other types of Arab Jews. And the way they did this, and you can look it up, there are things like the Lavon Affair in Egypt, where they basically had a series of terrorist attacks where they paid off a bunch of Egyptian Jews to carry out, and then they blamed it on the Muslim Brotherhood. So this is what they did in Egypt, which increased anti-Semitism, because the government and people were aware that the Israeli government was basically paying Jewish Egyptians to carry out these attacks. And then something that happened in Iraq was the Mossad, like the Israeli government, they basically carried out terrorist attacks in Iraq. So they bombed synagogues with instructions to terrorize and not kill. So they were terrorizing Jews in Iraq. And then it came out, years later, the actual evidence that Israel had carried out these terrorist attacks. And the reason for that was because they wanted to cause migration from Iraq to Israel, and a lot of people went to Israel. So, you know, in their whole creation of the ethno-state, they basically terrorized Jewish people in other countries in the Middle East, and none of this is told. None of this is, you know, unless you watch somebody like Richard Medhurst, they don't talk about how the Zionist state of Israel terrorized Jewish people throughout the Middle East in order to force this migration to Israel. And those are the Arab Jews that you see in Israel to this day, is like the descendants of those people. So, you know, the history of it is very complex, and it's not the case that the Middle East is so much more anti-Semitic than other places. Like, you have to understand the history of how this happened with Israel. And, you know, it's very, you know, politicians like Tulsi Gabbard, they've been lying for years. Every time, you know, people like you or me, Willy, like, try to point it out, people are like, oh, you're just, you know, like, triggered by Tulsi Gabbard because she acts like a patriot and loves her country. No, I'm not triggered. I don't give a shit about Tulsi Gabbard, okay? What bothers me is that normal, logical humans that, you know, investigate everything, they do all of this research, people in indie media, people like Constituent AO8, you know, my friend Jose Vega, who, you know, does interventions all over the place, you know, Jimmy Dore, he has a lot, you know, he had a big blind spot with Tulsi Gabbard, Nico House, all of these great people, right? Because I think these are all great people. But when we told them that there is a problem with this woman and that she has a very strange outlook towards Muslims, they think that we're just like shitlibs that are, you know, looking to rain on their parade. No, I understand Tulsi Gabbard's like fascist ideology because somebody explained this very well to me. You know, her Hindu nationalist ties. You know, I don't know if you guys know that during the partition war in India and Pakistan, there was a lot of violence on both sides, right? When they created the partition, a lot of Hindus had to flee Pakistan and go to India, and a lot of Muslims had to flee India and go to Pakistan or Bangladesh. Bengalis today hate India. You know, people in Kashmir today hate the state of India. So there's definitely fascist currents in India, and it is true that a lot of Hindus also died at the hands of Muslims during Pakistan. However, when we point this out to people, like I pointed it out to constituent 808, who I think was like her campaign manager or something, he kept equating that situation to the Israel-Palestine thing, and he insisted that there was violence on both sides. We know now with the Israel-Palestine situation that there really isn't any comparison. There isn't violence on both sides the way there was in the partition war. If anything, there was violence, on Israeli soldiers, majority Israeli soldiers, because all of that stuff about the decapitated babies and the raped women, it all came out. It's all fake. It's all false. That's not what is happening in Israel, right? But the two situations, India and Israel, have one thing in common, and it's that they're both the results of British colonialism. The British coming in and drawing an arbitrary line, and then creating an arbitrary ethno-state, right? So basically, Pakistan, now Muslim. India is supposed to be some kind of like pure Hindu state. Originally, they were neither. They were multi-religious countries where people basically of multiple religions live side by side with no problem. British imperialism really screwed all that up because they, did a lot of divide and conquering and drawing arbitrary borders that were very, very toxic. And the root of this is not Islam. It's British colonialism that created these arbitrary demarcations. So the root of it is not Islamism or Islamist jihad or whatever the fuck Tulsi Gabbard likes to say on Fox News. The way she says it, it's driving me crazy. The dumb shit that she says and the way that people eat it up because they don't know what the fuck is behind the history and they don't know what they're talking about. And this fucking bitch comes out and she says all of this garbage on Fox News, and if you point it out, and it doesn't even bother me that she says some dumb shit. What drives me crazy is that normal sentient people I know, friends, whatever, you point it out and they act like you're just easily triggered for pointing out something that's very clear. If you've Googled this stuff, if you've read about it, if you understand the background of the Hindu nationalist currents in India right now, what's going on under Modi. Another thing that Tulsi Gabbard does is, the United States right now, they're doing everything to break up BRICS, right? And India, because they have all of these contracts, tech contracts and other things with the United States, they're kind of I would say the easiest to break away from China because they don't want this whole Silken Road initiative to happen. What does the U.S. do? And why is a politician, or a former politician even like Tulsi Gabbard so important? She wants to focus on all of the cultural commonalities that we have with India because they want to cause a break between China and India. They do not want these two countries, huge countries, to get together. So what do they do? They boost India. They lie about how it's the biggest democracy in the world. India is not the biggest democracy in the world right now. It's a democracy that's headed straight towards basically like a type of fascist Hindu nationalism that is maybe not as bad as what's happening in Israel, but Kashmir, if you Google this stuff, it's basically, they put a fence around it. They're policing people that live in Kashmir really heavily, and then they're saying the Hindu nationalists in India that because 60 years ago, Muslims killed Hindus, now it's our turn to turn the region of Kashmir into basically an open air prison. So what's happening in Kashmir? What's happening in Palestine, they're not the same at all, but there's a lot of basically similarities between like the nationalist currents in these two countries. And of course Indians, you know, a lot of them come out in support of Israel, not all of them. I just saw a video of apparently like the unions are actually refusing to send Indian workers to replace Palestinians in Israel. So there's a huge movement of like working people in India who are against Israel, who don't have a problem with Palestinians, you know, who don't agree with this whole like colonial land grab and basically replacing all the Palestinians with Indian workers. But the government of India, the politicians, people like Tulsi Gabbard, they're definitely in bed, all in bed with each other. You know, and just the insanity of people like Tulsi Gabbard. She does, and she doesn't just do this with respect to Israel, by the way. Just like they're okay with killing Palestinians and then importing Indians to Israel in order to replace that labor. That's the same mentality that she has here, right? Because she pretends that she cares about the borders, that, you know, we have like an invasion of you know, like Mexicans and Venezuelans coming into the country, Hondurans, whatever, right? And basically there are some problems with immigration. Like, I don't think I do think there's an issue when you let a lot of people into your country, because it lowers wages, right? It, like, you know, makes it difficult to unionize and all of this stuff. So I'm not saying that, you know, allowing everyone into the country is some kind of great solution. I'm not the DSA, right? But what Tulsi Gabbard does, if you notice, she's not against immigration. She's against immigration from Latin America and the Caribbean, right? She's always bitching about the southern border, Latin America and the Caribbean. But, you know, if Israelis come, it's okay. If Ukrainians come, it's okay. And she's constantly vouching for more Indians to come here. She says that we need to increase the number of visas from India. Why is that? Because it aligns with her whole like Hindu nationalist ideology, where she thinks that we have some kind of religious alliance in common with India against the Muslim world. She's completely nuts, basically. She thinks that we have more in common with India than Mexico. We do not have more in common culturally. She's like, you know, for obvious reasons, we have cultural ties, you know, cultural similarities with India. Not really. We're not really that similar to India in any way. If we're similar to anyone, it's Canada or Mexico. Those are the countries that we're most similar to, technically. Yeah. And Hawaii is like off close to Polynesia. It was a random addition to the United States. We are probably on the mainland more similar to Mexico than we are to Hawaii culturally. So she's wrong. And not only that, but the Mexican experience in the United States, especially after the Mexican-American War, was similar to the Palestinian experience, because a lot of Mexicans were driven further south during the Mexican-American War, and Mexico lost 1/3 of its territory to the United States. That's the actual history of the United States. The loss of land that Mexicans and Native Americans, what they lost to the U.S. empire, that is the real history of the United States. So she cannot come out and talk about, you know, like take advantage of the fact that she looks a little bit Native American and then basically insult Mexicans, insult people that are coming south of the border, insult some of the tribes along the border, like the Navajo. They're stuck on both sides of the border. There's Navajo that are below the U.S. border, the U.S.-Mexico border, and there's Navajo that are above the U.S.-Mexico border. So when the United States arbitrarily drew that border, they were splitting a tribe there that has been there for thousands and thousands of years. That's the real history of the United States. So, I don't know Tulsi Gabbard, all of this bullshit. She pretends to be a patriot, and then she just takes advantage, I think, of pretty weak military service, because it's not like she had to serve that long in the military. She had a cushy position in the military because her father, Mike Gabbard, was in the military, and now she's a politician, and she's benefiting from basically being in the military, having been in the military, and Americans' outrageous respect for anyone that has been in the military, regardless of how much they lie on national TV, regardless of how much they make things up about religions that they don't know anything about, and regardless of the fact that her branch of Hinduism is like some weird West Coast cult that is basically one of the most weird, hippie, cults that there has been in the history of Hinduism, is over there in Hawaii and a lot of these other American locations, basically. And they call us hippies and liberals and weird converts. I'm not a convert. I'm still Christian. She's the one. They're the ones over there that engaged in this weird fanatical conversion pathway. And now what does she do? She actually takes advantage, if you think about it, of her racial ambiguity, I would say, because if people that don't know who she is look at Tulsi Gabbard, they're like, oh, maybe she's Indian, and she's not Indian. She doesn't know what she's talking about. She doesn't understand. Maybe she doesn't understand Hindu nationalism and what it's really about. And then people act like she's some kind of peace and love candidate. I mean, it's infuriating. Anyway, that was I feel like I'm just talking. What do you think, Willy?
Well, that's there's there were things you said about Tulsi that I was not fully aware of. I actually just assumed that her father's family, her father and her was from India. That's what my assumption was, and I did not know that they were converts to Hinduism. I thought that was something that I knew her mother was Irish American. That I did know.
Right.
Yeah. That I.
Yeah.
Know.
So she's Samoan and white American, Irish American.
Right.
And she's been embraced. I think by a lot of people that don't know what she actually is, and I don't know if you've noticed that conservatives, they also like to play a lot with minorities, and they like to act like they're representing, they're being representative, they're being diverse, whatever. I don't give a shit about how diverse she is. What I care about is, do the things that fly out of her mouth make sense? And they don't. And she has basically mastered the art of explaining I would say terrorizing people of other religions, Christianity, Judaism, Hinduism, whatever, terrorizing them by exaggerating the degree to which there is some kind of global Islamist jihadist threat, which, by the way, I explained, Islamism, it doesn't actually mean anything related to terrorism in Arabic. It doesn't mean anything like that. But she basically acts like there is a global movement to replace and convert and kill anybody that isn't Muslim. This woman is crazy. And the Middle East, if you think about what happened after 9/11 and the war on terror, we went there. The U.S. military went there, and they shot people and they killed 500,000 Iraqis. Those Muslims were not coming here. They were not coming here to shoot us. They were not coming here to kill us. And the only time they came in really into the country was as immigrants. And in places like New York City, we live alongside these people every single day, just like we live alongside Jews every single day with absolutely no issues. So, you know, this is like, I think I'm starting to really have issues with this Veterans for Peace whole movement, because whenever a veteran, like, you know, joins the anti-war movement and infiltrates it, which is my belief that this is what Tulsi Gabbard did. She infiltrated the anti-war movement. She came in with all of her garbage, her obsessive religious extremism, because I believe that she's an extremist and a Hindu nationalist, a very extreme and dangerous person. And I'm not saying that to like, you know, minimize groups like ISIS. I do not support groups like ISIS. But ISIS, if you look at its origination, you know, like where it came from, it was funded by the United States and Israel. There's actual Israelis in ISIS. You can look this up. So ISIS, the United States, and she even said this when she used to like talk about ISIS. She would talk about how the U.S. funded ISIS and how dangerous it is to fund these extremist groups. But ISIS is basically an extremist group that doesn't really fulfill a different function than what the neo-Nazis that we were funding in Ukraine. They're basically all extremist groups that we fund in order to create chaos in the region for some kind of land grab, which is what's happening in Gaza, because the United States and Israel, they want that oil or whatever, you know, like they want that access to the port, right? So, what she's doing is she is pretending that there is some kind of like global jihad against us, when it is her, as part of the military, that invaded these people. And, you know, like, do you expect if you invade someone and you shoot at people for them to be, you know, mild and not shoot you back? Like, you know, not try to, obviously, if you're in the military, you are attacking another country, they're going to have something to say about it, right? They're not all going to, you know, lie down and die like you want them to. So this is like, I feel like Tulsi Gabbard, her experiences in the military, have really turned her into a psychopath. And that's like the mildest thing I can say about her. And I really am having trouble understanding why all of these people that supported her are so soft on her. Because what she's doing now, it's unforgivable. Completely unforgivable. And I can't stand it anymore. I really cannot. I really feel like all of these people that have access to her, Nico, I love Nico House. I used to watch him. Call her and put that bitch on blast, because I don't understand why, like, at this moment in history, you think it's more important to preserve your relationship with this genocidal maniac than to actually call her and tell her to change her position. What is wrong here? Like, what is going on?
Well, I've heard Jimmy Dore the other day do a video on Tulsi Gabbard, and he pretty much washed his hands of Tulsi. So did Pasta and Fiorella on the Combo Couch, and Tara Reid on the Combo Couch last week. I mean, they were pretty much like really surprised by her, felt betrayed by her, and pretty much was letting everybody know how misled they were by her. And,
well, I think it's great if people are understanding that they were misled, but I think it's time to move on and put her on blast. Yeah. And really, like, call her and pressure her, and that she must change her position. Because, like, this is something that is inexcusable. It really is inexcusable, the way that she's supporting this genocide in Israel. It's not okay.
Israel was, I think this situation with Israel, it was like a big wake-up call for a lot of folks. I mean, they let a lot of stuff, I think they let a lot of it slide by, but this was like the dividing. This is like the line drawn in the sand right there, the straw that broke the camel's back. You know, I think a lot of people are starting to call her out right now. Seems like it.
I mean, like, I'm glad something happened that did this, but I wish it hadn't come to this, because, like, I really feel like the warning signs were there. Let me, like, show you her guru, okay? And also, like, the picture with the face mask. But the controversial religious sect, I don't know if I can share my screen, but, like, this picture of Chris Butler is so revealing, and I feel like people should look at it. People should see it, you know? And really understand her background.
Okay,
I don't
see. Let's see. I'm trying to think which one is it? Is it the is it the one that says Apoco? Let's see.
It's the next to last link that I sent you on private chat.
Okay, hold on a second here. The next to the last link. Okay. Let's take a look at that one. Is that the one? Oh, the insider one. Okay. I gotcha. Let me go and get I can get it shared on over here for you. Give me a couple of seconds.
And then here's this guy on Twitter too. I'll put the link again. It's like the last link. Okay. With this religious organization she's a part of, and the things that they say, just the things that they say. The Ties to Science of Identity Foundation, a controversial religious sect that some call an abusive cult. And when this came out, people were like, oh, it's just the DNC that's smearing Tulsi Gabbard because she supported Bernie Sanders. It turns out, no, that's not that's not what was happening at all. She's really part of a very weird religious organization, right? That's not a DNC smear. It's reality. And that's, like, if you scroll down, you'll see the picture of this guru that she follows. This guru that she follows. That's Chris Butler, right? And then the last link that I sent you, the Twitter, it'll say, like, it shows some of the things that they say about Muslims and even Christians. I don't think I have the quote for Christians, but if you open it, the last Twitter.
Okay, give me a moment here and I can do that for you. Alright, let me take care of this. Give me a couple of seconds here. All right. This was. No, that's the one with the mask. Oh, I'm sorry. It might be. Is it the Anna Paulina Luna one?
No, it's this one, the last one I just sent you on private chat.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Okay, let me do this real quick. Hold on a second.
Yeah.
I'm trying to see if I can get this one. It'd be a second here. Just waiting for it to load.
I'll read Ellen's comment. I'm joining late, but I believe the U.S. Indians she's referring to are Tohono O'odham, whose reservation straddles the U.S.-Mexico border. There are Navajo in Arizona in the northern part of the state. Okay.
I got you.
My apologies.
All right, I got it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, like, if you play that, I think that's a video.
Oh, okay.
Is that a video?
Right,
yeah.
Those Muslims leave immediate boom. Because they're completely allowed to kill any infidels. Any infidel, anyone who doesn't worship God the way they worship God, you can blow them up.
I'll play it again.
Slip your throats. Doesn't matter. No problem. You're doing God's service.
Full of violence, and it's so low class. They're teaching you so Mickey Mouse. What happened? It's so violent.
They're demons who are going, no. Bullshit. There's only one reason why Pakistan has not dropped atom bombs in India, and that's because there's 200 million Muslims still in India. If those Muslims leave, immediate boom. Because they're completely allowed to kill any infidels. Any infidel, anyone who doesn't worship God the way they worship God, you can blow them up. slit their throats. Doesn't matter. No problem. You're doing God's service.
Full of violence. And it's
Yeah, gotcha.
So this guru, this guru that she has influenced her so much, he thinks that Pakistan would throw an atomic bomb on India, and the only reason that they haven't is because there's Muslims in India. First of all, Pakistan is a developing country. They're not gonna waste an they're not gonna use an atomic bomb on India. It's yes, there were a lot of Muslims that killed Hindus during the partition war, innocent people, and nobody is saying that didn't happen. But that was an actual scenario where you actually did have violence on both sides. There were a lot of Muslims in India that had to flee to Pakistan because Hindus on this side of the border were butchering them. So this is something that happened because of the arbitrary line that basically British the British carved up these countries in ways that didn't really correspond to what was actually going on in the region. I'm not an expert or anything on South Asia, but I'm telling you that it was actual Indians and not whatever Tulsi Gabbard is that warned me about the fact that Tulsi Gabbard was going along with this fascistic Hindu nationalist ideology. So not everybody in India, or not everybody that's Indian American, agrees with Tulsi Gabbard's bullshit. And what's surprising is that they're the ones that are able to point it out much faster than Americans, American patriots that think Tulsi Gabbard is just pulling in another religion into the coalition. Yes, she's pulling in adherents of another religion into the fascist coalition. That's what she's doing. And India is a key part right now of the fascist coalition that the US wants to bring in. Not just because of the fact that they have been invading the Middle East and other majority Muslim countries for a long time now for resources and oil as land grab, but also because they want to break BRICS. They want to break this alliance or possible economic alliance between India and China. That is the American strategy. That is the reason for politicians like Tulsi Gabbard. It has nothing to do with but she'll justify it with the idea that Hindus and Christians and Jews have something in common, and the thing that we have in common apparently is hating Muslims. This is what she thinks that we all have in common. So I this to me it's not even really. It doesn't really correspond to reality, really, because if you go to the Middle East, there's lots of Christians. Egypt has a big Christian community, Syria, Lebanon, that really were living peacefully there. Obviously, they're a minority, so it's not always easy to be a minority, a religious minority in a country. But they've lived there for years, right? And I don't know, this is not when Israel bombs Palestinians, they're also bombing Christians, the Christian minority. They're not just bombing the Muslim majority. So a lot of these realities, the reality of it falls apart. Her whole ideology, where she thinks the axis of good is everything that's not Muslim, and that the axis of evil is everything related to Islam, basically.
Yeah, her ideology seems to be that, and somehow in the past 7 to 8 years, she has convinced people. Even now, she's convincing people that she's this principal anti-war politician, and especially now, she can't be, especially with the rhetoric she's using. I mean,
the rhetoric, you know, like, and I don't, you know, I'm starting to like care less. Like, I feel like I went through a stage where I was more Christian, and then sometimes I let go. I'm like, I get lazy, and I don't want to. You know, I'm starting, like, I start to question it a little bit, but I feel like overall religion can be good for you sometimes, as long as you don't use it as some kind of political tool against other people. Like, I mean, in terms of like your spiritual growth, whatever. But she's just like always really gone forward with this like religious hypocrisy, you know, where she pretends to be very calm and whatever. She's always like saying aloha. Aloha my ass. Like, you're trying to basically pushing a genocide on 2 million people, and then you're tempering that by pretending to be a normal, moderate individual when you're actually complete psychopath. This is like beyond, you know, this whole hypocritical religious thing. I'm really not a fan. Like, if you're going to be religious and actually advocate for peace, I don't really have as much of a problem with that. But her whole pushing of like this bizarre tie that she thinks that the Western world should have with India and Hinduism doesn't make sense historically either, because Islam, Judaism, and Christianity basically started in the Middle East, right? All three religions are the three global monotheistic religion. Hinduism and Buddhism, I have nothing against people that practice Hinduism and Buddhism, but they're actually more removed from Western culture. I don't know what she's talking about. You know? So they're actually more removed. So, like, when she says things like, we have so much in common with India, the world's greatest democracy, that is factually untrue. It's theologically false. We actually, if like, well, technically, the America was Native American initially, right? So it's Native Americans had a lot of like polytheistic stuff going on. So maybe they had more in common with Hinduism. I don't know, no relationship, but maybe they had more in common in the sense that there were also like branches of polytheism here in the United States before Europeans arrived. But as a Christian majority nation, we do not have more culturally in common with a country like India. With Palestinians, I'm telling you this. Like, we do not have more in common with that, with a country like India. This is purely a political alliance that she's pushing, because she is basically pushing. They want to find a big partner in the global South for their money laundering, warmongering, and like a block to break BRICS. And India, that they feel like, you know, fulfills this for them, because, you know, they have a relationship, an economic relationship with India, really, more than a cultural relationship. And it's all about economics at the end of the day. It's all about money, and the relationship with India that they want to push is because they also want to have a country with a lot of people that can serve as a labor force that is not against them politically, or, you know, won't rebel against the United States. Indians are pretty happy with the fact that they have like this customer service market cornered, basically, because so many of our tech companies use Indians as customer service. Stuff like that. So that's a economic relationship we have with India. Everybody knows it. I'm not saying anything that's like new. So, anyway.
Well, I mean, the puzzle fits in, and you gave me new perspective on Tulsi that I didn't realize. Some of it I already knew was foreknowledge, but she sounds more sinister than I was actually thinking. Well, I mean, she sounds a whole lot worse than I was already developing a negative opinion of her for quite a while too. But she's a very complex person because whenever she gets very negative, then she'll trip me over and say something totally positive, like we got to prevent a nuclear war with Russia, and she'll sound correct on the Russian-Ukraine conflict. She still sounds correct on the Russian-Ukraine conflict. I can't figure her out. Have you noticed that?
You actually broke up a little bit. Could you repeat what you said?
I'm sorry. Yeah. I'm saying that she's a very complex person because she will frustrate me to no end and get progressively worse, and then she'll surprise you and say something about Ukraine and Russia, which is correct, and she's correct on Russia, Ukraine, about negotiation and trying to prevent World War III, and then in the Middle East, she's sounding like Nikki Haley. She just contradicts herself all over the place a lot too.
Well, that didn't really surprise me that she was good on Ukraine and Russia, because if you understand her ideology, I wanna show this picture of her though. The last Twitter I sent.
Okay.
If you don't mind.
Right.
But if you understand her ideology, it doesn't really surprise me that she was good on Ukraine and Russia, because that still fits into her ideas about, Islamist jihad being the biggest threat to the world, right? So, as a warmongering psychopath that thinks that, like, all Muslims worldwide are taking over, engaged in some kind of vendetta against the Western world, she wouldn't prioritize something like the Ukraine-Russia war. Her beef is really with Muslims. It always has been. You can tell from, like, the whole science of identity thing that she grew up with. Like, her guru, Chris Butler, was very homophobic. People have talked to her, like, Muslims have talked to her, and they, and said, like, oh, I really like Tulsi Gabbard, and I thought it was just... Here's the thing, like, sometimes people have a sixth sense about something, just because of their life experiences, whatever, and there's no outright proof, but I've heard from people say, like, there's something weird about Tulsi Gabbard. I feel like she treats the Muslim countries differently. Remember that when there was a terrorist attack on 9/11, Tulsi Gabbard volunteered immediately for the army. She wasn't one of the ones that actually questioned the narrative. Remember that, like, 9/11, we know now that it was Saudi Arabia, right? And possibly also Israel, both. And the United States, it could have been a false flag, like, that participated in this whole thing. That was 9/11. So it wasn't simply a Muslim attack on America. That's not what happened in 9/11. In fact, there's videos of Gaddafi that have gone viral because he says, like, the hijackers didn't come from abroad. They came from JFK. They came from the airport. So we need a real investigation, first of all. What actually happened in 9/11? Tulsi Gabbard is still out there lying, saying that Islamist jihadists attacked us on 9/11. If we don't have the truth of what actually happened on 9/11, if there's no public investigation into what actually happened on 9/11, we're never going to advance. People are never going to get over the stereotypes that they have of Muslims, like, invading our country, which all of that was really, like, because, like, I grew up in a neighborhood where there were Muslims, and nobody really blinked twice about it before 9/11. Really, it wasn't really a big deal. 9/11 happened. 9/11 was a false flag attack, in my opinion, much like October 7th, right? There needs to be a real investigation before a retaliation. You have these politicians out there lying about what actually happened on 9/11, and she is still lying to this day about the fact that this was some kind of religiously motivated attack, which it was not. So, like, if she is still lying about this, I don't give a shit about the fact that she was right about Russia and Ukraine. Her whole ideology is like from the Middle Ages. She acts like this is the Crusades. She thinks that Muslims are looking to all like attack us and convert us to their religion. This is crazy. I visited Middle East like basically as a guest and a tourist, not as part of the military. And I can guarantee that if you go and you're not a part of the military, you're not shooting people, people aren't going to shoot back at you. You'll eat at restaurants, like live a normal civilian life. People will treat you with respect. They're very friendly. Just like if you go to other parts of the world, people are very friendly. They don't hate Americans. They don't hate you. They hate your government. That's what they hate. They hate the military because the military went into Iraq and killed 500,000 people. That's what they hate. So, this is not, and frankly, it's not just Muslims that hate the United States. People all over the world hate the U.S. military because of what, what they've done in terms of like invading other countries, the government especially. Sanctioning other countries, getting involved in other countries' affairs. And that's a similarity that Africans have with the Middle East. Even if they're Christian countries, Latin America, they have that in common with the Middle East. So all of these different people, like even within this country, like the Native American population, they came out, Native Americans in support of Palestine. You saw their dance number at the Washington, D.C. protest because they relate to the Palestinian experience. Is that a religious issue? Like, this is not about religion. Tulsi Gabbard keeps making it about religion. She thinks there's some kind of global jihad against us. These people...
Of sorts. Yeah.
Yeah. And that is her ideology. And whenever I tried to point that out to somebody, people would literally call me crazy. Like this, no, she's not. She's very reasonable and like moderate. She's not moderate. She is very much a religious extremist, Tulsi Gabbard, and her main beef is with with Muslims. She thinks that there is a global jihad against Hindus and Christians and Jews, and there is not. There is no global jihad. There are terrorist groups that if the United States stopped funding them and sending them weapons, maybe they would they would have less money to inflict terror on the population. So she should look to her own government about. She used to be at least a little bit reasonable about that, which I think is like why people gave her the benefit of the doubt. But at the end of the day, she's a religious extremist. She really is. And it's and it's very obvious right now. Like right now, it's like in full force. She really thinks that the Palestinians are, like terrorizing Israelis, and that they're, like, what more proof do you have to have? All of the videos that have come out of like Israeli bombs, they killed 10,000 people in less than a month. Like the information does not seem to filter into her brain. She's very brainwashed. If nothing else, if she's not evil, she's brainwashed. I think she's evil, and I think she's a religious extremist and like a religious crusader. And I like I seem to be alone in this opinion because people are like, oh no, she's like just like an opportunist. I actually don't think she's an opportunist because the way that she quit the Democratic Party signifies to me that she's not just an opportunist. Like I would consider AOC to be more of an opportunist in that way. I don't think that AOC is a religious extremist. I think she's an opportunist and a flake and a little bit of a ditz, honestly. Like that's how I would characterize AOC. But Tulsi Gabbard, I really think she has some. I don't think she's an opportunist. I think she really believes. I think she's a religious extremist. I really do.
A true believer of sorts, I guess you could say.
Yes, because would an opportunist quit the Democratic Party the way she did? And maybe that's why people liked her so much, because she does seem to really believe and not act like an opportunist. I don't, and I agree with them. I don't think she's an opportunist. I think she's even more dangerous than an opportunist, right? Like for example, somebody that I would consider a horrible opportunist is Anna Kasparian. I think she's awful. I think she's a shitlib. I think she's an opportunist. But as people pointed out, because she's Middle Eastern Christian, an Armenian Christian, and she pointed out the genocide, because that was her last straw, right? Because she understands what's going on over there, and she's always been horrible, Anna Kasparian, on things like the economy. She even had a terrible position on Syria, but this was too much for her, right? The whole genocide in Israel thing. Whereas someone like Tulsi Gabbard, she really does seem to have taken a lot of good positions up to now. Although I still think you should show that COVID picture because it's funny.
You can show it again.
Yeah. But that. Do you think she's an opportunist, Willie?
I've always, from what I have noticed, her since I started to know about her, her history, and I first heard of her in 2012 when she got elected. I didn't think anything of her in the sense that she, she was just another Democrat. I heard that she was going to be the heir apparent to Clinton and Obama. That's what I heard about her. So I wasn't impressed with her for that reason in the very beginning. What initially impressed me about her at one time, when I used to be a fan of her, was when she went and exposed to the world what the Democratic National Committee was doing to Bernie Sanders with the fraud of 2016. And for that, I even though I'm angry with Bernie Sanders these days, I am grateful for what she did to the Democratic National Committee, showing what a fraud the DNC was and the need for independent politics in that regard. I do think she was unfairly attacking on some fronts, but not from the criticisms you just gave today. I'm talking about there were some other areas where she was unfairly attacked by Hillary Clinton, on areas where she was, where it was kind of vengeful politics for Hillary Clinton losing the 2016 election, claiming that the Russians were grooming her to be a third-party candidate in the 2020 election, when no such a thing actually ended up taking place. I wish it did, just to piss off Hillary Clinton. Would have had more respect for her. But, as I said, I've seen her get worse and worse and worse since 2020, with an occasional times, on occasion, seeing her take positions which says there's some hope for her, and then she'll go and let me down again, and she frustrates me to no end.
It's a very frustrating. She's really a very frustrating character. But I think what frustrates me isn't her. It's the fact that people are really easily very gullible. And when you tell them they adore her, and when you point this out, they hate you. I have been very hated for a while now. For my strong dislike of Tulsi Gabbard, my strong dislike of Tulsi Gabbard, and pointing out all of her bullshit. This is, I agree with Ellen. It says, Ellen, I don't think you're crazy. I lived in the largest Muslim country on earth, Indonesia, and I never experienced hatred towards Christians, nor the U.S., though the U.S. might deserve it. Exactly. That's exactly what I'm trying to say is that it's not easy to be a minority in any country, whether you're Jewish or Muslim in America or whether you're Christian in a country that's majority Muslim. It's always going to be less comfortable, obviously, than if you're the majority. But the crisis of jihadism in Muslim countries that Tulsi Gabbard is like fear-mongering about, that's not the case. You can perfectly go to one of these places if they're not at war, right? Which is another thing, if it's a country that's at war. But if it's a country that's at peace, a Muslim majority country, nobody's gonna like force you to convert or like this is not really what happened in these countries. Is they just became Muslim majority countries because of history. The same way that we became a Christian majority country because of history. It doesn't mean that there's like a national movement to convert the minorities. And just pointing out here that this whole like face shield, like people accusing me of being overly liberal, not patriotic, and like falling for the liberal scams. Who's falling for the liberal scams here? Tulsi Gabbard is the one that's wearing a fucking face shield. This is Tulsi Gabbard. This is the real Tulsi Gabbard. The one I've been like calling out and pointing out how much of a fraud is. The one with the face shield that we're looking at right now. So this is like what I've been saying the whole time, and it's just crazy that nobody saw it. For like so many people just refused to see it because she just had so much sway over so many people, and she spoke at the anti-war rally last year about the war in Ukraine. And honestly, I don't have a problem with that. I don't have a problem with her taking a good position on the war in Ukraine and saying that we have to end that war, because I do agree that we have to end that war. But guess what? Russia ended that war. That's basically how that went down. And this is it's unbelievable, the hypocrisy that we have, because people that will I just see a very different treatment of somebody like Tulsi Gabbard and somebody like the squad members. I'm not saying they're not terrible. I'm not saying they're not like opportunists. But you'll see somebody that rails so hard against, like Jimmy Dore railed so hard against, and I like Jimmy. I think he's funny. I really like him. But just as an example, I'm saying railing so hard against the squad members and how they're opportunists. But then when it comes to somebody like Tulsi Gabbard, it took a lot of people, not just him, a lot of people, a lot of time to see what she's really all about, which is basically, unfortunately, the ideology that she backs the most is really very similar to Bush too. Remember the axis of evil? Bush was a crazy evangelical Christian, and he believed that Muslims were part of the axis of evil. Like, he believed that there was, he believed in this like Middle Crusades notion from the Middle Ages that we have to go over there to get rid of the axis of evil. And that is exactly what that's when Tulsi Gabbard went into the military. That is her military attitude. That is her military training. And if other people talk to her about it, if Indian Americans talk about it, or if people from other countries like talk about it, what happens to all of us is we're smeared as like not understanding the military enough, or not understanding that Tulsi is some kind of veteran for peace. By the way, like, is there some kind of like police against police brutality group? Because like that's like the funny thing to me is like Veterans for Peace. I have nothing against people that like went to war and came back and understood finally what was actually going on. I have nothing against them participating in the anti-war movement, whatever. But notice how they're always like placed first, the Veterans for Peace and the anti-war movement, and not like the victims. of the actual soldiers that went over there, the victims of their crimes, right? So you never see, like, in police brutality protests, people, like, give a special voice and a special position to veterans of the police force. Why is that? Because those are the people that were, like, employed to do all of the crimes. And that is what the military, like the U.S. military does, and that is the U.S. military that Tulsi Gabbard is a part of. So, I don't have a problem with Veterans for Peace, really, like, but I don't think that they should take any kind of special place in the anti-war movement. Definitely not more of a place than the civilians that were actually, like, being attacked, because, like, essentially what you're saying is that it's more important for us to have sympathy for the PTSD of soldiers than for the people that they butchered. So, like, you know, like,
maybe. I'm sorry. I think. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. Yeah.
I was just thinking. I think that was part of the reason why there was a lot of us on the left that was kind of enchanted with Tulsi. She was a veteran that was. She wasn't saying things as profound as, let's say, someone like an Abby Martin, and like a real anti-imperialist, but she was hitting those themes broadly. She was talking about Assange. She was talking about the military-industrial complex, and I'm not defending her. I'm just saying she was talking about these things a few years ago that impressed a lot of people on the left, people like myself. And I mean, I was impressed with some of this rhetoric. I mean, it was intoxicating rhetoric, and I'm pissed that it was all a lie. I mean, and all of that. But I think that one of the reasons that she was so embraced by the left at that time was basically because she was a veteran. They felt like it was a great way to spread the message to normies, the people out there. The people who, people who would kind of scoff at such a message. They found a woman who was, not going to lie, a woman who is very attractive, who's military, and who's saying things that need to be said at that time. And that's, and a lot of us fell for her song and dance. I was guilty of it. No longer guilty of it, but 3 or 4 years ago, you couldn't tell me any different.
I mean,
I know now. I'm different now. I mean, I recognize. I mean, everything you said about her, I absolutely agree. I recognize her for what she is, and she is a fraud. I mean, I mean, I want to share, like, the last video I want to share is this one that, Okay.
Like, I think there's a problem, like, with the whole anti-war thing in the United States, where people want to prioritize the voice of veterans over, like, the victims of the U.S. military. I don't know if it's because they want to, like, that the most Americans, regular Americans, have experience with is as veterans and not as victims of the U.S. military. So maybe that's why. But there's also a lot of, I think it would be better to have, like, a more international movement, for people to understand, like, what the U.S. military does in these other countries. Like this clip that people are sharing in Iraq, like, this is what the U.S. military did in these countries. And I also really hate it when there's, like, an anti-war movement. This guy, I went to, like, a local meeting for, like, a local anti-war group, and this guy from the South, he was like, none of you guys have any experience with the military, right? As if we don't have any experience with like the war machine or whatever, right? So in the U.S., it's really like they prioritize the voices of these veterans, where I don't feel like the what you see in cities like L.A., New York, like all of Houston, all of the big cities, right? And there will be people online that will denigrate the fact that these are like immigrant cities. All of the immigrant cities absolutely have like a better pulse on the international situation and what's going on than Veterans for Peace. Because most veterans in the U.S. are not for peace. If you were truly for peace, you would not join the U.S. military. Right? I understand, like, a lot of people join because they're in poverty, you know, because they need a wage, because they need health care. Somebody told them that they want to go to, that the military will pay for college. And it's the same everywhere in the world, really. Everywhere in the world joins the military and police force for all kinds of reasons, including financial reasons. And I'm not judging that. I'm just saying that those people are not necessarily the only voice that you should listen to in the anti-war movement, and definitely should not be a priority. But people really have placed veterans on a pedestal in the anti-war movement over the immigrant community. And that's what pisses me off. Because like at least growing up in New York, I can count on less than one finger, like out of 10 people that immigrate to the big cities, like all over America, 9 have come in some kind of like refugee or asylum format. It's very serious what the U.S. military does in other countries, and the people, in my opinion, with the best pulse on all of that is the immigrant community, not Veterans for Peace or Veterans for anything. And I do think that there are veterans. I don't know who this guy is. It was like a white guy with dark hair who was like caught protesting about the war in Iraq many times. I think he protested Bush or some other high level official. Do you know who I'm talking about, Willy?
Let's see.
Mike something. It was like a young guy. Like I feel like that guy is a real Veterans for Peace, unlike Tulsi Gabbard. So I do know those people are out there, but
remember, it doesn't ring a bell right at the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry about that.
But anyway, this video broke my heart because it's just like, you know, like this, and this is the war Tulsi Gabbard was in.
You want me to go ahead and play it?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll scroll it back to the beginning. Okay.
Open the door! Open the door! Get your hands up and come outside. Come outside. Everybody in the house needs to come outside. No, keep your hands up. Everybody come outside. Push them this way. That's too much!
So, you know, like now, there's like reports now that there's American soldiers right now killing people in Gaza. This is like, people have to understand, like, look their military in the face. Like, there's no excuse anymore. The videos are out there, the proof is out there. People have to understand that American veterans are not all heroes. Like, that is, like, this is not, you know, and I'm not saying that I don't have sympathy for them, but it, you know, like, there has to be some public recognition of this, like, some understanding of the fact of like, what the military does, what the military makes people do.
Absolutely, and just what we I totally agree, and I just like to find the right answer and all of that. Yeah, but anyway, is there any other links you want to add to this?
Yeah, I wanted to add the Anna Paulina one, which I thought was like really crazy.
Yeah. Okay, I think it's up here. Let me find it real quick for you. All right.
But Willie, what do you think about Gabbard's like background with the whole like conversion therapy stuff and all of that?
Oh, you talking about the gay conversion therapy from years ago?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's from her father's really social conservatism. And I think that was from her. That was where that came from, and she kind of backtracked off of that for a while. But I think she kind of crawled her way back into that. It seems to be the case. So she's kind of jumped on that culture war bandwagon too. I mean, it's kind of like what what's her name said, Kim Iverson. When Tulsi went to the right, she didn't go to the right in quite the way that she was wanting Tulsi to go to the right, or would have been comfortable going to the right. She went with this neoconservatism and this culture war stuff instead of this kind of I'm kind of paraphrasing here, more of a paleocon sort of a non-interventionist sort of thing that's kind of like an attraction of some parts of the Trumpian MAGA movement. She didn't go with that. She's going with this Bush Cheney redux from 20 years ago.
That's exactly what she's going with. It's like Bush Cheney 2023. That's what Tulsi Gabbard is.
It's like she doesn't have. It's like she's not dumb. I mean, and I don't think AOC's dumb either. She's not okay. AOC's a ditz, like you said. She's not a ditz, Tulsi Gabbard. But Tulsi Gabbard has grifted in so many ways too. I think there's a little bit of grift in what she's doing. Some of it is what you just said, but there's some things that are calculated in what she's done because she needs to cater for an audience. And I think sometimes she dug herself in a pit that she can't quite get herself out of. That's the way I feel sometimes.
Well, and like this pit it's like unforgivable, and it coincides like right before this attack happened. She was lying about 9/11, and she went to New York, and I remember that she visited like the whole Ground Zero, whatever. She was lying about 9/11, saying that it was like Islamist jihadists that, created 9/11, and that's why we went to war, and that she is going to Africa to get rid of Islamist jihadism. She always uses the same shit, the same fucking words. Like, I wanted to. Kim Iverson actually pointed this out the other day. It's like people. These politicians rely on the fact that people don't know that they're not going to Google this for themselves. But jihad doesn't mean, in Arabic it means struggle. That's what it means. So it says, if you Google it, it says it's an Arabic word which literally means striving or struggling. In Islamic context, it can refer to any effort to make personal and social life conform with God's guidance, such as struggle against one's evil inclinations, proselytizing, or efforts towards the moral betterment of the Muslim community. Although it is frequently associated with war. In classical Islamic law, Sharia, by the way, was not always a terrorist thing. It literally used to be like the legal system, right? So like even for people that don't support it today because they associate it with like an Islamic system, it was literally the name for the legal system that existed in the Muslim world. So the term refers to armed struggle against unbelievers. So that would be the extreme interpretation, right? While modernist Islamic scholars generally equate military jihad only with defensive warfare. So it's kind of the same thing as Islamism. Like, it's a word that has been used many different ways. So it's like you can't really, you know, people will take these words out of context. Somebody like Tulsi Gabbard, they normalize the most extreme use of the word, right? So then whenever somebody says that, people are scared shitless. Like, whenever people say that word. Similar to, like, when we, like, we've seen terrorist attacks on TV where people are saying Allah Akbar right before blowing themselves up, right? So Allah Akbar, all it means is God is great. It doesn't, it's like people will say that to you, you know, maybe after you like give birth to a child or get a job, people will say Allah Akbar, God is great. So after you get a job, for example, right? You know, people will say, "Oh, God is great. It's great that you got a job." So, like, you know, like if you're gonna take like the most extreme interpretation of a phrase or a word based on something that you saw on TV when you saw a terrorist doing something, it's like very, very dangerous because they're basically just associating an entire culture, a language, an entire language with terrorism. And that like feeds into this whole thing with collective punishment. It like where it doesn't even seem that it matters what people do, what context people are saying these words in. All of these Arabs and Muslims, like, they're considered terrorists but by these psychopaths in the administration. It doesn't matter if they're like you know, saying these words, you know, like it's like their entire culture is stained as negative. That's the problem because, you know, it's not like they're going after a terrorist organization alone. They are smearing the entire culture, the entire religion, and then every time people point out that they're smearing an entire culture, religion, whatever, they're like, oh no, we're only referring to the extremists and the people. Well, if you're only referring to the extremists, like, why aren't you more precise in your language? There's absolutely no excuse for using broad-based terms like Islamist jihad because of the difficulty of like pinning down what that means. If you're going to talk about a terrorist group, talk about the terrorist group. Talk about ISIS, right? So she doesn't do that. She hasn't mentioned ISIS in a very long time. You know, even the Israeli government does better than her on this aspect, where they say like Hamas is ISIS. Hamas isn't really ISIS because like Hamas currently actually gets funding from Qatar, I believe, and they've also been funded by Netanyahu.
I was going to bring that point up, I wanted to bring that point up. I had to tell people that the current leader of Hamas is by default Benjamin Netanyahu. In a way, he is.
I mean, we're probably don't even know the full story yet of like who actually started all of this, right?
Well, this is my understanding about October the 7th. The Egyptian government warned Israel that there was an imminent attack going on, and they just had a kind of a lollygag attitude about it. And because I think that they just let it happen. You have to consider who were the people that were attacked on October the 7th. They were people that were living in the kibbutz, the people who would never vote for Netanyahu, the people who would never vote, who are on the left and never votes for Netanyahu, the constituents that the Netanyahu and the right wing parties hate, were the people that were attacked And so he didn't care if they died. He just used them to pursue his cause, because those people were more useful to him dead than alive. You know, we were talking about that. Yeah. So we were talking about earlier about this, synagogues getting attacked in Iraq. Well, I mean, what happened in Israel, in the kibbutz, you could say the same thing. And way worse, people died, and they allowed it to happen.
Right.
So he's a criminal in every way you can imagine. I think I've always said I go by the hashtag arrest Netanyahu.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with Miguel here. It says, I think we need to recognize Zionism is the number one issue that needs to be resolved. It's the root of many problems impacting us today. It really is. Like I found out the other day that there's more venture capital going to Israel than any other country in the world.
That I didn't know.
That is just like crazy. The
what burns me in this country is that half the states in this country has laws against BDS, whereas if you violate the BDS laws, that you could be put in prison for up to 20 years and fined $250,000, which goes against the very First Amendment. And you have a bunch of right-wing people who claim that they're for the First Amendment, but when it came to Israel, they throw the First Amendment, they shoved the First Amendment down the toilet. I mean, it drives me nuts.
And like the crazy thing about the BDS thing is like, how is it illegal to not buy something?
Or to urge people not to buy something. It's your right to urge people not to buy something. And I mean, I remember my very first boycott growing up. I was boycotting Coca-Cola because Coca-Cola was doing business with South Africa in the 1980s, and I remember having to boycott Coca-Cola again 20 years ago because I understand that Coca-Cola was involved with death squads in Colombia killing trade unionists who were trying to organize Coca-Cola plants in Colombia. So I mean, boycotts are effective in trying to put a stop to whatever injustice takes place in this world. So if it means boycotting products to make sure Israel is well behaved, so be it. And to try to put a stop to this is ridiculous. And to make a double standard that you can boycott other countries, but hands off of Israel as far as boycotting, that's ridiculous.
Yeah. I don't really care if people are going out with their Israel flags, whatever, but it's very crazy how emboldened they are to shut other people up. And dox them, and you're not really allowed to say anything. And I guess there is a possibility that somebody like Tulsi Gabbard just cannot say anything as active military. The thing that takes me away from believing in that too much is just, to me, it's like this political candidate, everybody is motivated by different things, right? And different politicians have different personalities. You have your rabid opportunists. You have your people that really don't care either way, like somebody like Richie Torres, who's just a rabid opportunist, right? Mm-hmm. In her case, I feel like the fact that she has taken some ethical positions in a lot of cases is really points to more of a ideological, religious element there that's a little bit out there. You know, and people have said it, you know, and you know, like, oh, she's like weird and it wasn't a cult, and that's what they're referring to. That she's not just like a garden variety opportunist, of which there's many in Congress. And you know, people are right to be tired of those people too. Like somebody like Nancy Pelosi is one of the most horrible people on earth, and I don't think Nancy Pelosi, for example, has any particular beef with Muslims. I think she is a rabid opportunist, and she doesn't give a shit about anything except for herself. And you know, she like doesn't think that she's going to rot in hell because she probably has no God, right? Like that would be your Nancy Pelosi type of person, or you're like Mitch McConnell. Type of, like, I feel like Mitch McConnell is like that too. He just like doesn't give a shit about anything on earth, and except for like money and power. So there's people like that, and that, you know, it's like, and then like the victims of whatever it is, it just doesn't matter to them. And then there's people that like are like Tulsi Gabbard, who are a little bit trickier to figure out because they do seem like at times they take a moral position or whatever. It just turns out that she's like a crusader.
Yep.
She thinks this is like the Crusades. So, that's the problem.
She's much more sinister person than I ever thought she was. I used to think she was. I used to think she was a virtuous person, but she's turned out.
Well, she probably herself believes she is. Right? That's like, and that's probably why she always came across as more honest and whatever, because like if you have somebody at your door that really is, you know, strongly believes in like, you know, have you ever like tried to like dealt with like Mormons or, you know, Jehovah's Witness or anybody that like really spends an effort converting people? They, you know, like like they really believe that they're in the right and that they have the right path for you, and that they can help you with your life's problems like through their religion. And like I really think Gabbard, like, she really believes that really believes that Muslims are engaging in violent jihad, and that she has to defeat this enemy, and she really believes this. She's not an opportunist. She really believes in religious warfare. To me, it's like terrifying to me that she believes in religious warfare. Like, to me it's like terrifying, but I don't know if it's terrifying to you, Willy, but to me it's like
it is, in the sense that she's supposed to be the peace candidate, and you know, in the trying to persuade everybody that she's being the peace candidate, that end up kind of sheep herding everybody into a pro-war position. And she actually has people convinced that she's an anti-war candidate when she utters pro-war positions. I mean, and it's just frustrating to me. I mean, which is why we're having this conversation today, largely partly. And so, I mean, I'm glad we're having this conversation, because, I mean, I think about this myself quite a bit. You know, I mean, you probably see me post a lot of stuff about Tulsi Gabbard.
It's very interesting how she's, like, kind of, like, I would say, like, pieced together a coalition of people that, are kind of unaware of what she's actually saying, and like, you know, doesn't understand that these are dog whistles, and people that don't really understand her actual ideology and her background, people that don't understand, like, just like the whole history behind Hindu nationalism and how it rose and what is going on right now, and combine that with like more conservative religious support, or it's very interesting.
She's got people that follow her that are part of the Tucker Carlson audience on the right and a gray zone audience on the left that kind of follows her.
Yeah, and I'm hoping that like half of that has dropped off at this point. I do think a lot of it has dropped off. But just like I really feel like we have to get there faster. Like the amount of time that took is not okay.
I agree.
and it was very clear from a while ago. Now I don't have a problem with like people on the right being against one war. Like there were a lot of people that were like, I'm not going to the Rage Against the War Machine rally because Tulsi Gabbard is there and she's not really anti-war. I don't really agree with that. Like I feel like even if somebody is there that's only against the one war, it's fine to rally against for one issue. Like there's probably people at the pro-Palestine protests today that might not care about Medicare for all or something like that. Probably a lot, actually. A lot of, like, for example, Anna Kasparian and Hasanabi, like a lot of these famous, like, liberal streamers who don't have any financial problems probably don't give a shit about Medicare for all, right? That's going to happen. Like, people are going to be attracted to things on kind of an issue-by-issue basis. And I think it's fine for Tulsi Gabbard to have spoken at, like, the, Rage Against the War Machine thing. I don't have an issue with that. Really. Like, my issue is really, like, when people pointed it out, there was so much resistance, and it's really, like, gotten to the point where people use her language, because I've noticed this, a lot of her fans use her language to explain political and like political movements in the Middle East and North Africa, etc. And I really don't think like I've seen people use like her words, like things like Islamist jihad or Islamist jihadism. Like she is really like if you look at it like on Fox and like not just on Fox, like even CNN, a lot of other like because she does have a lot of pull on mainstream media, right? Even though she was rejected by a lot of liberal outlets, she has managed to kind of accumulate a following of people that use her language, and her language isn't really adequate for explaining what's going on in the Middle East. Like one of the things that I noticed when I went to Egypt, which is like a country I've been to a lot, is that the Christian Orthodox, which is like and it's very similar culture to Palestine because they're like right on the border. The Orthodox Christians there, the government, because there has been attacks on Orthodox Christians there by extremist groups, right? By ISIS, basically. The government employs people to protect them. Like there are armed guards in front of churches. But in the U.S., like the government doesn't really offer protection, like to black churches, for example, or they don't offer protection, like military protection, to synagogues. So, like this is like one of the largest, like most populated Muslim majority countries, like I think Indonesia has way more people, but at least in the Middle East, and the government offers armed military protection for religious minorities, and that doesn't happen in the U.S. So, like, when I saw that, I was like, you know, people don't realize, like, sometimes a lot of these Muslim majority countries that people, like, demonize and stuff, there is an actual real effort. There is an effort to protect religious minorities. Whereas in the U.S., how many shootings have we had? There was, like, the shooting at the black church. There was the shooting at the Tree of Life synagogue, where the shooter just gets through, and there really is not any change in government policy to prevent these acts of terrorism in the future, is there? Because the mass shootings, they just keep happening, and they keep happening, and there's no government response. So, like, you know, and I'm not even saying anything about, like, the Second Amendment. If you want to take the position that good guys with guns, whatever, protect from bad guys with guns, then there should be military protecting schools, synagogues, black churches. Isn't this, like, the greatest democracy in the world, where you're supposed to, like, look out for all of these, like, racial and religious minorities? I don't see that happening. Like, do you see that happening? And it's happening in a country that isn't even a democratic country, because that's not even a democratic country. You know?
Syria, I think that the Bashir Assad government actually looks out for religious minorities too, if I'm not mistaken. And the United States has been trying to topple Syria for years. Case in point. And,
yeah.
You know, you had John Bolton during the Trump presidency urging Al Qaeda, urging the United States government to side with Al Qaeda back then. I mean, which, I mean, that's just mental. I mean, to choose Al Qaeda over Assad, who's secular, who protects religious minorities, that's just crazy.
Right, like they're the ones that take these crazy positions, and then I feel like there's a lot of projection, where, you know, and then they want to just, what's their reaction is to, like, smear an entire culture as extreme, and then like enforce collective punishment, basically, because if you have, and there are a lot of people, like, in the U.S. that really, they just see everybody from this part of the world as extreme. They just, like, just by virtue of who they are, that's, like, and where they're from, they just cannot see the difference. It's very sad. There's a lot of racism still, like, in this sense. I've noticed that, like, maybe because it's not, like, a big part of the American population, but I feel like it's, like, a more obvious type of racism than, like, towards other people that minorities in the U.S. that have been here longer, that are, you know, like, for example, the things I hear people say about Arabs and Muslims, and I know that black people and Native Americans, Mexicans, etc., have a very sad history in the U.S., but I feel like we've gotten to the point where if you say something bad, racist against somebody like that, the institutions, government, they're terrified of lawsuits, right? So, because a lot of people really, like, fought for their rights, and if somebody says something very racist, and they're, you know, like, the CEO of a company or something like that, they're not allowed to say stuff like that. Like, where it seems like with the whole the Arab and Muslim population, all bets are off. Like, they can say whatever they want. That this is, like, what I've noticed.
It seems
They,
like the last acceptable form of bigotry that's allowed in America, where you can go and talk ill of the Arab community and of the Muslims.
right. It like that's what it seems to me. Like it's like even though America has had a lot of problems, I do feel like we've advanced in some ways. So I don't think that like 2023 America is the same as 1950s America. I do think some things have gotten better. Like I'm not totally you know, I'm not an optimist either. But I think a lot of things still need to change, but I'm not totally negative on the whole matter. But yeah, it does seem like the last acceptable form of racism, because the things I hear people say, like these CEOs and like a lot of these like celebrities, are so outrageous. I feel like it's like a blast from the past. Like it's like looking into the 1950s, except you replace black people or Native Americans with Arabs and Muslims. Like it just seems like that's what it seems like to me. Like it's like very
Absolutely.
very in your face. I haven't, because I wasn't I didn't exist in the 1950s, so like I haven't seen this like degree of acceptable, like openly acceptable racism in my lifetime. I don't know about you, Willie, but like in my lifetime I haven't seen it.
In this day and age, in the early 21st century, certainly it applies to the Arab and Middle Eastern Muslim population. It depends. And now, strangely enough, in the 1970s and the 80s, I grew up. As you know, I'm half Puerto Rican. I grew up when there was no Hispanics around me. There was no Latin American community around me at all. I mean, there was, and it was just all. It was all white people, African Americans. That was it. And so, in the small community I grew up in, we were the other, because my mother was a little more olive skinned than everybody else, and so so there was a little bit of racism, or racial insensitivity, shall I say, that but as I said, I mean, it's nothing compared to what the Middle Easterners were going through after 9/11. I mean, because a lot of them literally had their lives in danger because of what happened with 9/11. They were being profiled all over the place, and overtly harassed. I mean, and so I mean, so any problems I may have had was minuscule compared to this community. Just saying. Not that it was right what I went through, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, I feel like there, a lot of screwed up stuff still happens, but what I notice is just like in areas that are supposed to be civilized, like quote unquote civilized, and I mean like not on the streets or like dealing with the police. I mean like in college or at the workplace, at regular civilian workplaces and stuff like that. I've never seen that kind of like unhinged kind of racism against people. It's always been maybe like more couched, maybe like more dog whistle, maybe like less, more, at least like making an effort to pretend to like be, inclusive and stuff. That's the kind of thing I've seen in my lifetime, even though obviously there's like moments where people experience job discrimination or whatever, but I've never really like at the workplace or I don't know if you remember Black Lives Matter protests in 2020, for example, how a lot of people came out in support of Black Lives Matter on LinkedIn. It's very hard today to come out in support of Palestine on LinkedIn. You could get doxxed by your employer, or you could lose your job. So, like, that's what I mean by, like, just, it's like another level right now with the, where it's like, broadly, like, considered unacceptable to even support, like, Palestine at work or at your place of employment or anything like that, compared to other, like other, they're literally equating people that support Palestine to terrorism. So, including non-Arabs, including Jewish people.
Well, I mean, there are Palestinian Jews, and there are Jewish people against Zionism being harassed by the Israeli IDF. I mean, they're getting beaten up, for being opposed to Zionism, the thought crime.
Yeah, it's like I haven't seen that degree of like verbal police, I would say, for other types of topics. I mean, maybe it's just because Israel is like a very tech-oriented country, and they really like control the internet. They control. They have like a lot of venture capital going into their technology companies, and links, like actual working relationships with a lot of the big tech companies, Google, Facebook, Amazon possibly, I'm not sure, but that's what it seems like. That it's just and I feel like that's a lot of, I do agree with Miguel that Zionism is like the number one issue to be addressed. And because they also pay off the AIPAC also pays off a lot of our politicians. Like they own our politicians to the point where you had a lot more people, really. Well, not. I don't know if it's a lot more. Willy, but like there were a lot of people that came out against the Ukraine-Russia war that won't come out against this. So.
Well, I am seeing more voices against this injustice that's taking place against the Palestinian people more than I would have seen 20 years ago. And there is just a little crack opening of pushback against the mainstream media outlet that Israel's always the good guys and the Palestinians are a bunch of terrorists. Usual propaganda that goes on from the mainstream media. There's a little bit of nuance that kind of cracked open into the scene, because in the age of social media, a lot of ordinary people got these cell phones, and they're filming a lot of shit these days, and there are things they're seeing that's being put on social media. People are seeing for themselves, and they're like, it's not what the mainstream media have said all along. And so people are starting to question things. And in that regard, there's a little bit of, maybe just a little sparkle of optimism in this kind of dystopian scenario here. But I think I need to go in a minute here.
Yeah.
But it's been a very wonderful discussion, though.
Yeah, I apologize for talking too much, but I also I agree with you on a lot.
I'm always happy to have you here. So I mean, that's okay. That's
and
fine.
I'm glad you've kept going with your show, and feel free to keep sending me your links.
Absolutely, and we can probably continue this discussion or segue this discussion to something else later on, if you like, in the near future.
Okay. All right. Bye, Willie. Have a good night.
All right, you do too. Take care.
All right. Bye.
Yeah, good night. And everyone, this is oh, Lucy, is it okay if I leave your personal, I mean, not your personal information, your Twitter information down on the description box below? I wasn't sure whether I should do that or not.
Yeah. That's fine.
Okay, I will
Thank
do
you.
it when I get it. Yeah, so okay, so
All
I
right.
wasn't sure. So, all right, everyone, be sure. I'm going to
Bye,
put her
Ellen.
information on. Be sure to follow her on Twitter when I put the information down. And I haven't had any sleep all day long, so I am going to go and conclude by saying, everybody, yeah, I'll see y'all next time. I'm going to just sign off right now because I worked last night and I have been up since for the past 24 hours.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh no!
All right. Bye.
Okay, bye. Take care. All right. I will see y'all later. Bye bye.